Welcome to a sunny new podcast where I'll be speaking to people from the arts, business and beyond, and shining a light on their stories of success on the South Coast. This week's guest is Erin Thomas Wong, the life-friendly business mentor who helps women build successful businesses without sacrificing time with their families or their well-being. Erin is also an international speaker, the author of Mumpreneur Evolution, the host of the Life-Friendly Business podcast, and she was recently recognised as a top 100 IALSO UK female founder. In this episode, we talk about the main challenges faced by female entrepreneurs, the 7 key elements of a life-friendly approach to running a business, and the importance of community and finding your own tribe. Erin has helped thousands of women build successful businesses, but many of the issues and lessons we discussed are universal. I joke that I might not be her typical target audience, but I learned so much about the unspoken truths of motherhood, the invisible load that many women carry, and matrescence. I'd urge all of you guys out there to stay tuned in. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's do this. Welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
As I said to you, I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you. It's been a real learning experience for me doing my research for the episode. And as I said, when I first came across your work, I absolutely loved the concept of the life-friendly business. And today we're primarily going to be talking about that work that you do, helping women adopt a life-friendly approach to running their businesses as a mentor, as a speaker, and as an author. But before we get into all of that, I'm always fascinated by the people behind the work. So I wondered, you have such a great story and one that is so relevant to the work that you do now. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit about your early career and entrepreneurial journey?
Sure, because it feels like it's kind of a story of two halves, really, because I was always so set on working in the media. And from when I was about 11, I started doing work experience, getting up at 5 a.m. to work at a radio station where I lived in Nottingham. And I ended up doing a media degree and combining that with lots of work experience. And my first job was in television as a runner on Friends Like These with Anton Deck and then with Ian Wright. And I loved it. And I basically worked my way up to be a production manager at RDF Television. I worked on programs like Celebrity Wife Swap and Scrap Heap Challenge and things like that. And I absolutely loved it. And I feel like I really achieved what I wanted to achieve. And it was when I started thinking about having children that I thought, how is this career going to combine with that? Because I was brought up by a single mum. She worked 6 jobs sometimes to look after me and my sister, and sometimes we would be collected by childminders who we didn't know from school. And so it had always been in my head, if I could, I would like to pick my kids up from the school gate. And I knew that that career in TV would not allow that. So for me, having my first son when I was 29, that was the catalyst for kind of reassessing what I was doing for my career. And I had a really kind of traumatic birth experience, and it really shook who I was, who I thought I was, because I was this production manager, and I was very organised and in control, and I would create schedules that people would stick to. And then suddenly I had this newborn baby who did not stick to my schedule. And, I was very anxious and absolutely exhausted. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't think that these are going to work together. And so it was at that point that I started my very first business.
Wow, excellent. And I just wonder, as you know from the title, this podcast explores the idea of success. And one of the things I think is interesting is how it evolves in time. And I think probably what you consider success now looks very different to what you perhaps did back then. So if I just want to start by asking you, when you were in the midst of your TV career, obviously it sounds like that was an ambition since being a real young kid to do something like that. So if you look back to, say, your mid-20s, what do you think success would have looked like to you at that point?
Well, it was absolutely about status and about having the next job title and having the increase in salary. And, living in London, it was about having a nice house and then getting the next nice house and having a car and being able to afford to live in London and go out and do all those things. So, yeah, it was very financially orientated. And of course, working in something like TV, like with many industries, it's all consuming. So basically
notoriously long hours
and last minute late night working and things like that. And really, for me, it was very much like, it wasn't until I had a family and I had someone else that actually I'd rather be at home with my baby than staying late and getting a taxi home at 11 o'clock. That kind of changed my priorities of what success actually looks like.
Yeah, well, we're going to definitely come back to that later on in the podcast. But let's talk about, so you start your own business and ultimately move into what you're doing now, which is mentoring other women that that are either starting or running their own businesses. So could you tell us a little bit how you transitioned from that first business you started to where you are today?
So the first thing I did was I didn't know anyone who ran their own business. So this was a whole new world for me. And it was one of those kind of crazy universe type moments where someone told me about this jewelry that they'd bought with their baby's fingerprint in. And it was a company called Small Print. And I started having a look at the website and it came up saying, no representative in your area, franchise opportunity available. So I was like, what does that mean? And it was very much a kind of business in a box type business. And I had a 6-month-old at this point. I was desperate for something for me. And I threw myself into researching what a franchise was. What does this mean? And so I invested in that franchise when my son was like 7 months old. And that was such a huge learning curve. But I had the support of the franchisors. So, that was luckily for me, I had a very positive experience with that franchise. I do know people that have paid a lot of money for a franchise and then not had the support that is expected to be able to help you grow the business. Yeah. But it opened up this whole new world for me. And then I started thinking about how else I could be working with mums and babies. And I started running children's activity classes in local venues. And I was like organising them and doing the website and the marketing. So everything I did kind of was around mums. And I also ran Ealing Mums in Business networking, which, was about connecting other women like me. And then, so when my son was 6 or 7, we'd had a second baby by then. My husband got headhunted for a job in Abu Dhabi. And we had decided at this point that we were ready to leave London and we were looking at moving down here to Bournemouth. So this job came up in Abu Dhabi and it was kind of like, well, we're already planning to make a move anyway. And it was honestly one of the hardest things that we've ever done after having kids. And I'm glad that we went. We've got no regrets, but it was incredibly hard. And when we were out there, I was suddenly 7,000 miles away, not only from friends and family, but from this whole network of other women in business that I'd had created around me with all the different businesses I was doing. And it was at that point that I thought, right, I need an online business and I want a digital business and I want to be creating community online that any women from anywhere in the world can access. So this is what I do now, and it's evolved since then. But what was great about it is when we decided, actually, we're both really unhappy in Abu Dhabi and we want to come home, we came back to Bournemouth. I bought the business with me, and it was such an amazing surprise to realise how entrepreneurial Bournemouth is and creative. And so I was able to really hit the ground running and meet all these other amazing business owners here.
That's a fantastic story, yeah. And landing in Bournemouth then, before we move on, I mean, this is success on the south coast. So obviously you've lived in, like you've talked about, quite a few different places. How have you found Bournemouth then since you've landed here? And what's your favourite thing about living in this area?
I love it so much. I think being by the sea is so good for the soul. I think having the space and the fresh air, the wider streets, you know, especially coming from London, we used to have to like line up on the playground for the kids to go on the swings and go on the slide and stuff like that. So, you know, I know that Bournemouth can get busy in certain areas and at certain times of the year, but having that feeling of space and nature, when we were in Abu Dhabi, you know, to talk about people's ideas of success. Well, surely if you're living somewhere where it's hot and sunny all the time, blue skies, palm trees, surely that makes you happy, right? That's what people think.
That's
well, no,
the dream we're sold.
It was
isn't
soulless.
Yeah.
It felt soulless. And actually, I missed the seasons so much. And so I love the beach all year round, actually, especially in the winter, seeing the changes and things like that. And you know, Bournemouth is really friendly, and I feel like I've connected with so many like-minded people who are here because they've chosen to be here because they're looking for a different way of life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll come back to that idea of community, because again, I think that's a really important theme that runs through a lot of the work you do. So let's talk about life-friendly business then. Would you mind, just for the benefit of the audience, just telling us a little bit about the work you do with that and what the mission is?
Sure. So for me, a life-friendly business is all about creating success on your own terms without sacrificing time with your family or your well-being. And this is really, you know, all these years that I've been following a lot of entrepreneurial, you know, content and advice. There's a lot of stuff out there about the hustle and the grind, and how when you're starting a business, you need to go all in and you need to put everything into it and you need to work all the hours. And unfortunately, this is, you know, having a real detrimental effect on lots of people, especially women who are trying to, in the case of the women that I work with and myself, trying to build a business around caring for other people as well, and feeling like we need to, you know, sacrifice all these other things in our lives to get to a certain level of success before we can then have the work-life balance. And, you know, my argument really is that for our own well-being, we need to get the foundations in first of all the things that we need to be able to stay sane and stay well within ourselves, so that we can be resilient to all the challenges that we're facing with running a business and with life in general.
No, it's such an amazing mission, and that's why I was so kind of taken with it as soon as I came across it. And as I mentioned to you at the top, it was a bit of a learning process for me, and I found the research really interesting, and I thought it would be useful maybe for others that maybe like myself that aren't as familiar with some of the issues, to talk a little bit about the Rose Review and highlight some of those challenges facing female entrepreneurs, just to set some of the context. So for those that don't know, Alison Rose was the CEO of NatWest Group and the first woman to lead a major UK lender, and this was back in 2019. She was commissioned by the Treasury to lead an independent review of female entrepreneurship in the UK, and that resulting report was the Rose Review. So some key stats that I found interesting from that: only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female, and up to £250 billion of new value could be added to the UK economy if women started and scaled new businesses at the same rate as men. So clearly there's a huge potential here for growth if we can harness that power of female entrepreneurship. So what were your thoughts when you first came across some of that information? For me,
it's not surprising to me that there are a lack of female entrepreneurs as well. I think there is some evidence around the fact that women are less risk averse than men, especially when it comes to taking finance. I haven't got the stats to hand, but there's a whole thing about how women ask for less money in investment rather over men.
I've got it here.
You've got
actually.
it there. Brilliant. What's that stat?
So female-led businesses is in the UK launch with 53% less capital on average.
Yeah.
Well, should we take this point? Let's jump in, because you've already touched on some of those challenges, and that report highlighted 5. And as you said, number 1 on that was an awareness of an access to funding. And secondly, risk awareness. It says women are 55% more likely than men to cite fear of going it alone as a primary reason for not starting a business. And again, does that resonate with you in your experience?
I think that, I know for myself and for women that I mentor as well, that there can be a real lack of confidence there in, especially, I was a production manager. I had a job description. I could look at that job description, and after a year I could say, tick, 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 I can do that. When you start a business, you're literally writing your own job description. And so you have all these kind of self-doubt moments and low confidence about whether you're going to be able to do a good enough job, especially if you've taken a break to have children as well before you started your business. And one thing I want to say as well, so I personally, when we talk about measures of success, I'm not interested in getting investment in my business. I'm not interested in taking out huge loans to grow my business. I've been very intentional with, this is what's amazing about running a digital business, is that I have an online business manager who does, up to 20 hours a month for me, but I do everything else myself. And it is perfectly possible to build a solid, successful business as a one-man band with the technology that we have these days. So, and when I was running the venues for baby and toddler classes, I wasn't interested in taking out a £200,000 loan to create a venue which might not work. There's a real community of women who feel similarly to me. Like, we want to make a positive impact and we want to create businesses that are going to help people, but I'm not interested in creating a team of 20 people and having an office. So it's working out, this kind of new way of working, which can be so much more flexible for women who are also the primary carers. And
I think that comes back to your whole philosophy. It says it on the front of the book, on our terms, and defining your own what success might look like.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You talked then about some of the challenges where you said, some women feel like maybe they don't have the skills, and that's number 3 on the list here, that women are apparently less likely to believe they have the skills necessary for entrepreneurship, which is clearly a myth. Yeah. But that feeling, I know, again, in the book, one of the themes you talk about is imposter syndrome. So again, is that something that you I guess that is quite a common feeling and something you're able to help with?
It's something that we talk about pretty much every single day. And for many people, they don't realise that what's holding them back is imposter syndrome. We can give ourselves all sorts of reasons why we're not taking action, and why things aren't working for us. And, when you actually pinpoint it and you realise that it's because you feel like you're not good enough, you're worried about being judged by people, you're worried about what other people are going to think, like all of these things, especially people feeling like they don't know enough yet. So they're just going through this cycle of getting qualifications and doing courses. And it's like, well, when I've done that course, then I'll put myself out there. Yeah. And it's because we're looking for that reassurance that we're good enough to be able to help people. And I love the saying that you only have to be a few steps ahead of someone else to be able to help them. And this is something that we have to keep reminding ourselves, because otherwise we get paralyzed and we literally don't take action.
It's such a great message, and as we were talking just shortly before we came on air, so to speak, I think some of these messages are so universal, because I kind of joked with you that I might not necessarily be your standard audience or your, but I've really, a lot of this stuff has really resonated with me. And I think, thinking as you were talking then, even starting something like this podcast, I've not done anything like this before, and there can be a tendency, I think, for anyone to think, I need to know everything and I need to seek perfection, and you always wonder, if I just read another book on the subject or I'll just listen to another podcast. But ultimately you just need to get on and do it, don't you? And at some point I was like, right, I just need to launch this, and you kind of learn as you go along, and like you say, you pick up tips, and if you're lucky you meet mentors like yourself who can just point you in the right direction as you go.
I've got another quote for you. I'm full of quotes, but imperfect action beats perfect inaction. I think that's right. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction. So we've got to take action even when it's not perfect, because if you're not taking any action at all, nothing's going to happen. And I think that, it's, yes, so many of us are perfectionists, and, we want everything, we want to have all our ducks in a row. But with business, you just need to move forward. And some of the most successful people, their stuff isn't perfect. They make mistakes. But this is where we've got to embrace being human. And as a small business owner, that's our USP as well. And that's why we need to be putting ourselves at the forefront of our brands and not hiding behind our logos and pretending that we're a big company when it's just one person. I really feel strongly that we need to be, utilizing that as a superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we hear so much these days in things like marketing, like the power of the story. And I think people are really interested, aren't they, knowing that backstory for the individual. And that, if anything, is a real advantage to a small business, that kind of personal touch and that feeling that it's genuine. Yeah.
And I really struggled myself with putting pictures of myself out there. And so when I launched this business, which started in Abu Dhabi 8-9 years ago now, I did the whole thing of using all the generic pictures of women, and obviously sometimes I still have to use generic pictures, but I didn't really put my face out there. And then I had my own mentor who was like, you've got to put your face out there, Erin. And I started posting pictures, and of course they're the ones that people were liking and commenting on. But in my head I was like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing, like just putting my face everywhere. And of course my lovely husband made some comment about, your face is everywhere. I'm like, yeah, thanks. But you have to get over yourself in a way, because those pictures of me having coffee in a coffee shop, doing a little selfie, that is what gets engagement. That's where people feel like they're building a relationship with you. Mm-hmm. And, that's how you have those conversations started.
Yeah, and like I said to you earlier, I think it works brilliantly on your website. The fact that there's real pictures of you and your family, it must be relatable for other women seeing that, and they think, oh, Erin's done it and there's her family, so there's got to be a chance for me. And you're even on the front cover of your book, which is brilliant. So those were the first three. Then there's a couple more of the top 5 challenges, and I think this is where it gets really interesting, particularly with the work you do, because I think everything you do is just perfect to help people address these challenges. So number 4 is disproportionate primary care responsibilities. Women are twice as likely as men to mention family responsibilities as a barrier to starting a business, but ironically, and I think this is kind of borne out by your story, that for many women with children, the flexibility around family care ends up being their number one reason for starting a business in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's so hard not to make generalizations when we're talking about this stuff. And I realize there are going to be exceptions. I can only share my experience and the women in my community. But yes, we are often the primary carers of the kids. And it's not just the practical stuff, it's also the emotional toll of raising a family. And, generalizing, it's something that doesn't affect men and their careers in the same way that it does for women. And one thing we talk about is the invisible load. And, when you start having these conversations about all the stuff that we carry around as women in our heads, about, like if a child's ill, what medication they need, whether they need their PE kit today, whether they've got this club on that day, and then also I wonder how they're getting on with that friend that they've been fighting with. And then I wonder how my parents are my parents okay? Do I need to sort out a GP appointment? All this stuff, and looking after the house and thinking about what you're going to have for tea. This does seem to be a majority, a female thing that we have, and we carry this invisible load around with us all the time. And, I think that for so long, it's been a case of, well, just get on with it. Just get on with it. That shouldn't come into your work. That shouldn't interfere with your work. And what that's doing is leading women to getting, completely burnt out and depressed and feeling like they're failing at everything because they're trying to do all these things. And I think that it's really important that we have honest conversations about the fact that we're all finding it a challenge to juggle all these things in our lives. And the more we talk about it and the more we normalize it, that's great. And, for me, this is the whole kind of mumpreneur term that is very debated, but a mumpreneur is someone who is combining being a mother with running a business. And, in my opinion, it's very helpful to actually recognize the challenges of being a mum and what that means for your business. And actually, we are one person. So I am a mum and I am also a business owner. So, for me, that is all encompassing, and I need to recognize all those elements of my life.
Yeah, and I think that's why the work you do is equally valuable to guys as well, to be honest, because I was listening, we could perhaps mention that you also run the Life Friendly Business podcast, and I was listening to your episode on the invisible load, and I was thinking, again, this is really valuable as a guy. Again, men should be aware of this and we should be having more conversations. And there were parts of it that made me think, a bit guilty, I should be more aware of this. But it is really important to open up those conversations. And I would recommend any guy out there definitely to check out that episode.
Thank you.
Perhaps I'll put the link in the description. I think you've also talked about things like the identity shift as well. Would you mind kind of talking a little bit around that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, becoming a mother was life-changing in terms of who I was as a person, but then what I ended up doing with my career as well. But I think that, before you have kids, you have this, a very clear idea of who you are often, and especially if you're working in the career that you've always planned to work in, and everything's feeling steady, and then you have a family and it's really exciting. And then, like I said, with my experience, my son was ill all the time. I had a traumatic birth. I didn't have the birth that I thought I had control over. And it made me question who I was. It made me question what I was capable of. I became very anxious. And all those things kind of changed my perception of myself and of the world. And it's only been recently that I've, been speaking to lots of people, and I interviewed an amazing woman for the podcast about matrescence. Yeah. And matrescence is actually a term for the transition of becoming a mother, which is like the emotional, the physical, the social transition. And it's really fascinating. So I've written down what the episode here, episode 63 of the Life Friendly Business podcast. It's when I interviewed her. And she talks about this profound shift, which is very much like adolescence, because she said, we don't expect kids to go from being a child to an adult overnight and know what they're doing. You know, we give them this period of grace called adolescence, where their brain isn't functioning properly, they can't make decisions. And I've got a teen at the moment, so it's all very ringing true for me. But yet, you know, actually when mothers have a baby, something very similar happens. And I mean, she told this amazing story which made me cry as I was interviewing her, and I've never cried when I've been doing an interview before, but I won't kind of try and debate the whole story, but she was basically saying about how we're not talking a year or two, we're talking a decade of transitional time when you become a mother. And it was so powerful to hear that, because, you know, so many women that I work with, you feel like, well, I should have it all figured out now. They're 5, they're 6, they're going to school. And yet, why am I finding it so hard to, you know, to work out this or to balance this? But it's like, it's a decade. It's a decade before you maybe start to feel like yourself again. Not yourself again, because I think we evolve, basically. I think that motherhood helps us to evolve as people. And so no doubt that is going to change the way that we perceive what we want to be doing to earn money and to make an impact in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that term, because again, that was an education to me. I listened to that episode, and is it matrescence?
Matrescence, yeah.
And I have to confess, I'd never heard of that word before.
Not many people have, even in the world of mums.
That's
like
good.
It's still
I feel
fairly
better
new
about myself.
Yeah,
because I must admit that was news to me as well. But it really was an interesting concept, and it fits in perfectly with what we've been talking here, which brings us on to number 5, which is lack of relatable mentors, role models and support networks. So this cues up the life-friendly coach perfect, a business mentor perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, was this review 2019?
The original one was, yeah. And there's been annual updates. Yeah.
So I think it was back then that I saw this, and I really kind of latched onto that lack of relatable mentors, because it totally spoke to me. Because, you know, when I was first starting out, so when I had my 6-month-old, I thought, well, if I'm going to run a business, I need to go to some of these business networking things. And I was in London, and of course they're all breakfast networking, which is a nightmare when you've got children. And I'd go along, and there'd be all these, you know, men in suits, and they're trying to sell their financial stuff, and I just thought, I don't fit in here. And I tried various different ones, and I was like, I don't fit in. And, you know, I felt so small. Because, like I said, I'm not interested in, you know, like taking on this huge big company and building a team and all this kind of stuff. Like, that's not what was driving me. And it took me a long time to find my people, and actually the way I found them is to create it. I created a network and brought people closer to me, and that's what I've continued to do since then. But, you know, so many times I'm speaking to women who have been made to feel like failures. They've been made to feel like they're not being, you know, they're not achieving enough fast enough. And I had one mentoring client who came to me, and she'd been working with a coach, and she had the client had 5 kids, and she was running a business, and the coach, even though she was a woman, didn't have children. And every session she made her feel like, well, why haven't you done those things that we talked about? What, you've got your list, why aren't you taking action? There must be something that's stopping you from taking action. And she's like, I've got 5 kids, you know. And I think it's so important that we talk openly. And it's not relatable when you have these women earning 6-7 figures who've got nannies, you know, and they've got all this help, and they've got drivers, and they've got all that's not relatable. So can we have more women talking about the reality of running a business and your child throwing up when you're just about to go to an important meeting and you have to cancel the meeting? You know, this is the reality. And, you know, how it can make people feel so frustrated because they actually really want to work on their business, but they feel guilty about the fact that they would rather be working on their business than be taking little Johnny to the park, but that's okay. And we need to make that okay. And we need to recognize the fact that, that these women are also mothers, and that is such an important job to be doing.
Yeah, and I love the phrase "find your tribe," which I've seen you use before as well, and I think it's so important with everything, but particularly with all the challenges faced here. Because again, I was reading things about a lot of women feel that when they're working, they almost have to pretend that the kids don't exist, and when they're with their children, that they've got to almost pretend that the job doesn't exist. And like you say, it can easily lead to feelings of failure, or that you can't ever give yourself 100% in the way you'd like to.
Yeah, you literally feel like you're in between a rock and a hard place, and the summer holidays is an absolute testament to that, because you feel so torn between being playful, joyful, mindful mum and actually trying to keep your business going. Like, how do you balance those? But I wanted to tell you a quick story about this woman I interviewed years ago now, who told me she was so cross with herself because she was running a business and she went to pick her daughter up from the school playground, and a really important client called her. And she was like, I had to answer the phone. I answered the phone, and before she even thought about it, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm at Waterloo Station. It's a bit noisy. I hope you can hear me." And she said afterwards, "Why didn't I say I'm just picking my daughter up from school?"
Yeah.
And it really makes you, it gives me shivers even thinking about it, because this is what so many of us are feeling, that kind of invisible pressure to, like you say, pretend that we don't have kids, because that's not professional. And I do think that lockdown really helped with this, with when everyone was working at home and the kids were being homeschooled, and you'd see all these funny Zoom meetings of kids in the background and all the and it brought to life the fact that we are not just workers, we're not just worker bees. We have families as well.
We're actually real humans.
Yeah.
No, that's a great little anecdote though, isn't it, that just encapsulates the problem so sort of simply. Well, let's jump forward a little bit, because as he said, those were some of the challenges that were discussed back in 2019, and to an extent they all clearly exist today. There is some positive movement, I think. I was reading the most recent report, which was out last year in 2023. And it did say that 2022 was an unprecedented year for female founders, which was really great to read, and that women in the UK had actually launched over 150,000 new companies, which was more than double the number back when the first report was published. So that's progress. And what was really exciting, I guess, to read was what it looked like from a perspective of young women in particular. And a stat that I thought was really intriguing was that the report found that in the category of 16 to 25-year-old women, they'd actually created more than 20 times the number of businesses from back in 2018. So clearly there's a generation coming through now that are benefiting from the kind of information that's out there, and people like yourself, which is, I'm sure, really fantastic for people like yourself to hear.
That is brilliant to hear. And I do think that, I'm excited to see what the next generation is like, because I think, we've all been brought up really to think about putting ourselves in a box of what do you want to do for your career? You could be this, you could be this, you could be this. And now with technology, with the internet, with these things, we can do whatever we want. And, that's really exciting that that's coming through, and that we're having more entrepreneurs for sure.
And I think, to your earlier point, that we're living in a time where we can have more open conversations, whether it is about mental health or things like the invisible load that you referred to. I guess all of this is kind of encouraging a new approach for the younger generation. So those are the challenges. And I think, many of those you're helping women address on a day-to-day basis. But I thought, just to give people a flavour of the life-friendly approach, would it be a good idea just to quickly run through what you've called like the 7 principles, number 1 of which is flexibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you were saying before, this is one of the main drivers for women to start their own businesses. Like I said, for me, I really wanted to be able to pick the kids up from the school gates. But there's also, and I can't remember how many days it is now, or weeks of school holidays every year. So what's really interesting is that you think, like, when you've got a baby, I need to work around the baby and around nursery times. And actually, I hate to say this, but when they go to school, it's even more of a challenge because, nurseries are often open all year round or most of the year. Whereas with school, you have all the school holidays. And what do you do during the 6-week summer holiday? Do you pay for kids clubs? Do you ask one of your parents to look after the kids while you're working? And what so many of us strive for in terms of our level of success is not having to put, unless we want to, but not having to be forced to do that, and actually to be able to create a business where we can be at home with our kids for the summer holidays and still be making money. That is success to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess that leads into number 2, which is a business that energizes and inspires. You're actually doing something you enjoy. And you talked earlier about it's important that it must enhance your mental and physical well-being.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so one thing that often happens with women when they've left a career because they've had kids and the career no longer fits their family life is they go and they look for admin work, right? And I don't know what it is now, like £10 an hour, £12 an hour. And these are women that have been managers. And it's like, wow, I'm worth more than that. And I'm more highly skilled. I'm highly skilled. So, it's not just about getting income. It's not, when you're looking for a life-friendly approach to work, it's about doing something that you actually want to do and that lights you up. And I think if we spend so much of our life working, we've got to enjoy it, and running a business is not an easy option. So you need to make sure that it is something that you actually want to do and that you're going to enjoy doing on a daily basis. Otherwise, it's very easy to give up.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and I think it's so important, isn't it? Because like you say, it's not just about finance this at all. It is about something that's fulfilling. Absolutely.
And making a positive impact.
Yeah.
That's most of the businesses that that have come about through the community that I work with. They've come about because someone's recognized there's a need, there's a gap that needs filling, or they've recognized that they've really struggled with something and whatever help they got really helped them and changed their lives, and now they want to help people in the same way.
And I guess that feeds back into what you talked about Ealing. The Ealing group you did for mothers was born out of exactly that. Yeah. So you've already alluded to number 3, but it's about supporting the income that you need / desire.
Yes.
And it shouldn't necessarily mean low pay just because you're doing your own business. So I think those first 3, they kind of all come under the umbrella of what we talked about earlier about defining your own vision of success. So how would you help somebody go around kind of balancing out those 3 items and finding an individual's success?
Well, I mean, it really is. In terms of defining what they feel success is, it's the thinking about what you want your life to look like on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Like, how much time do you want to be working? Do you just want to work in the mornings? Do you want to work at the weekends, or do you not want to work at the weekends? Do you want to be able to go to the gym twice a week? And do you want to spend time with your parents, or maybe you're caring for your parents? So it's thinking about all of these things that you want to fit into your week, rather than thinking I'm going to work 6 days a week and then try and fit everything else in around, and that is a surefire way to get burnt out.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the way we naturally approach these things, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think there is, especially in the world that I live in, and the literal world, community that I live in, we need to be making money. Of course we need to be making money. This isn't about running a hobby. This is about paying our bills and about affording a holiday and affording nice things. But there's also a feeling of like, actually, I don't need 7 figures. I don't need 7 figures. Like, you know, what do you really need to be able to live a good life? And like, you know, really looking at what that means for you, because it's going to be different for each of us. But one of the big things about the, you know, supporting the income that you need is that we do need to make sure that our business model is viable. Like if we're working with people on a one-to-one basis and getting time for money, money for time for money. And actually you look at your week and all your responsibilities and you think, I can only fit in 5 clients per week. And then you need to look at, well, is this viable? Am I actually going to make the amount of money I need each month? And that's something that so many people fall down on because, you know, they've gone into doing something because they love doing it, or maybe, you know, it's kind of happened organically. And then it's like, well, hang on a minute. You know, is this the right model for you? Do you need to be looking at different things that you could do, like, you know, one-to-many or so definitely making sure that your business model is going to support that lifestyle that you want.
And I can imagine that must be somewhere where someone like yourself with the experience of seeing multiple different types of models and approaches can really help, because like you say, if you're just starting off on your entrepreneurial journey, it might be difficult to kind of see how you might reposition your skills and in a way that can be economically viable.
Yeah, and the truth is we don't know what we don't know. And, you know, when I first started this business, my plan was to make money by promoting other people's online courses and getting an affiliate commission from it. And, you know, I realized very quickly how hard it is to do that when I've not done the courses myself. I'm, you know, kind of promoting people. I don't know what they're like. And, you know, I was obviously investing in my own learning at the time, and I learnt about memberships, online memberships. I hadn't heard of them before. This was, you know, back however many years ago, like 9 years ago. And, you know, now I have a membership model that brings in recurring revenue each month. And this is the point, is that we don't know what we don't know, and we need to have our eyes open and be willing to learn new things as we go.
Yeah. This number 4 is, I to me anyway, reading everything you do, it's almost like, again, I mentioned it earlier, this is central to your whole philosophy about running the business on your own terms. And I know, again, one of the themes that comes through in a lot of the literature and your work that I see is the importance of setting and maintaining boundaries.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about why that is so crucial?
So I think a really good way to talk about boundaries is to give examples of what it feels like if you don't have them. Like, for example, if you are... you know, sending messages to clients at 10 o'clock at night on social media one night because you're working, that's all right. And then 2 nights later, you're trying to switch off from work, you're on Netflix and you're having a nice time. And then this work message comes up and you're like, oh my God, like, why are people messaging me at 10 o'clock at night? And you feel really irritated. Well, you've set the precedent there because you've sent a message at 10 o'clock at night. So if you want to set boundaries with your clients and, you know, and say to yourself, I am not going to respond to emails after 6 o'clock at night, for example, whatever it is for you, you know, you need to set those boundaries. And also, you know, when you feel like you're constantly doing stuff for other people, you're saying yes to other people's urgent and it's taking you away from your stuff, like, that's where we need to get our own boundaries in place, because, you know, so many of us are people pleasers and we want to do things to help other people out, but is that at the detriment of yourself and your own energy levels and your own well-being? So I think that, you know, and a very early learning curve for me was when my youngest was a few years old and I was doing the jewelry business and he was toddling about. And I had a call and I just answered the call. I didn't think, is now a good time to answer the phone? I just answered the phone. And it was a man asking me about the jewelry for his wife. And I turned round and there was this god-awful shriek and my son had got his finger wedged in a drawer. Now, I wish that I could say that I said, oh, I'm really sorry, I need to call you back. But of course I didn't. I was like, oh my God, I'm really sorry. I need to call you back, like slammed the phone down, and his finger was all like squished up and everything. And luckily, you know, because this guy was a dad, I called back and explained, and he was so lovely, and I still got the sale. But the point is, I thought, why did I answer the phone just then? Why did I answer the phone? Like, first of all, I was not in work mode. I was there with my toddler. Secondly, like this is not life and death stuff that I'm doing. If he goes to voicemail, that's okay. And I can take my son out in a buggy and walk along and call him back. So that was a really early lesson for me, that you don't, just because we've got this vision of what it means to be working and, oh, well, it's between 9 and 5, so I should be working and I should be answering the phone. We don't have to do it like that. And I think that, you know, more and more, that's what people are exploring, is different ways to work that is on their own terms.
And I think, again, this is kind of a universal issue, isn't it? Particularly post-pandemic, with a lot of people, even non-entrepreneurs, working from home. Those boundaries between home and work life are so blurred now.
Yes.
And that is just exacerbated massively when you're a mother looking after a toddler.
And that transition, we talk a lot about that as well, about working from home and work, you know, not everyone is lucky enough to have an office that they can close the door to in their home. A lot of people are working on their laptop on their kitchen table. And we've talked about the kind of rituals that you can go through to give yourself that transition. I mean, if you can go out for a walk, that's brilliant to kind of, you know, a commute back home. Obviously, for so many of us, it's a case of, oh my goodness, it's 2:45, stop what you're doing, drop everything and go and pick the child up from school. You know, you like frog march to school, your brain is all over the place thinking about work. You pick the child up, they want your attention, you feel irritated because you're still thinking about work. So it's really, I mean, this is where, and I've done a lot of personal development stuff myself on this, that we have to take back control. And the way we take back control is think, do you know what? At 2:30, I'm going to stop working and I'm just going to have a cup of tea and I'm going to sit and let my brain settle, and, you know, whatever it is that you need. And some of my members were saying, one of them wears a lanyard. So when she sits down to work, she puts her lanyard on, and when she stops working, she takes it off and hangs it up. And that's her signal. I'm not working now. You know, for me, I know that if I make a mindful ritual of, okay, that's enough for today, and actually shut my computer down, not just put it down to sleep, shut my computer down, I know that I will be a lot less tempted to dip back in.
Yeah, just send a quick email. Yeah. I love that lanyard thing.
Yeah, it's
brilliant.
brilliant.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a good idea. But I think it is important to kind of have something that symbolises, right, that's work mode.
Yes.
And then you put it away and it's like, right, I've taken that hat off now.
Yeah, and you know, with the world of smartphones, you know, it's a double-edged sword, because we can run our business on a smartphone, but it also means that in the evenings, when you should really be trying to switch off, then everything's jumbled up together, isn't it? Social media, emails, like it's all there. And, you know, it is down to us to set those boundaries for ourselves.
Would you recommend then, without kind of going down a rabbit hole, in a scenario like that, would you almost have a separate phone for your business that you can almost put away the same way you would with your lanyard? Because like you say, otherwise, with, you know, who's got the discipline when you're sat in front of Netflix at the night? There's always that tendency, isn't there, just to see what's happening on LinkedIn or whatever.
Totally. I think it really depends, and I've got some clients that do that, other clients that, you know, try different things, to like putting it in another room, or and it depends what kind of business you're running as well, whether it's going to be okay for you to have your phone off solidly overnight. But I mean, most of us, we're not dealing with life and death.
No. Number 5, I thought was a really interesting one. Be the best boss you can be to yourself, which I think this is another case. I think everyone can relate to this. We're always so harsh with ourselves, aren't we? You talk to yourself, your internal monologue is outrageous compared to the way you might talk to someone else. So what's your thoughts on this one?
I mean, this is just crucial, because we, like you say, are so hard on ourselves, and this like inner critic that we have going on, which makes us question everything we're doing. It makes us focus on the bad stuff or the mistakes that we might have made. And especially when you're working on your own, you don't have anyone to kind of change it. And that's why having a mentor just helps so much, to have someone say, well, hang on a minute, yesterday you did this and you got a really good response, because when we're on our own, we just like fester in the negativity. But this also comes down to giving yourself grace, which is what I say to people so often. And we were talking before about the invisible load and about all the other things, like if you have got stuff going on in your personal life, if you are not well, if you are low in energy, all these things, it is going to affect the way that you show up for your business. Now, you could beat yourself up and get angry with yourself and try and struggle through and, like literally feel like you're wading through treacle. Or you can think, do you know what? Actually, I'm having a really difficult time right now. What can I do today that needs to be done? That's my 5% activities, the things that really, really matter, that have to happen to keep the business going. And what can I do to have a rest or refill my cup? I think that's one thing that I've really learned, is that there's no point fighting it when I'm in a place like that, when I'm really, really tired, because you're not making the best decisions. And actually, you're much better off if you give yourself grace and allow yourself to rejuvenate and then go back and get the stuff done that you need to do.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I've seen, again, on some of your LinkedIn postings, for example, the importance of giving yourself space and giving yourself some time away.
Yeah. And, and also when we're scheduling our week, one thing that is just a recipe for disaster is to make your week back to back with no buffer time, because something always goes wrong. Like, let's face it, stuff like mistakes happen every day, people get ill every day, the kids get ill, there's always something. And so when you're scheduling what you think you can achieve in a week, please do not do it back to back. Give yourself time. And one of my clients calls Wednesday her capacity day. It's not a day off, it's a day that she can do whatever has flowed over into that, and that might be family admin or it might be business admin. On Fridays I try not to have any calls on a Friday. That's my time, so that I can I'm still getting work done, or I can go for a coffee with a friend. But it's having that space, because otherwise what happens is then you've compressed the week so much that stuff falls over into the evenings and the weekends, and then you feel really resentful about your business, and that's when the boundaries are out of place.
Yeah, and again, I think that's something everyone can relate to. It's almost one of the consequences of the electronic calendar, isn't it? That you can almost book up every 30-minute slot and not give yourself any headspace to move between any of those. And like you say, you book your last appointment that finishes at 2:45, and it has to finish exactly on time. Otherwise, you're going to be late to pick the kids up, and the whole thing just goes out the window. And
when you just think about, what's happening to your nervous system in living like that on a day-to-day basis, like it's not good.
No, not at all. And that is a great transition into this next one, number 6, strategically relying on support. And I guess that talks to that, not trying to do everything yourself. Yeah.
And I know, it's really hard when I talk about, you need to delegate, and people that are either early in their business or just not earning enough money right now to be able to outsource. They're like, well, how do I do that? And when I talk about strategically relying on the support of others, let's also look at your home life. So many of us have the situation where, if we're lucky, we have a parent or a friend that says, oh, I can have the kids, or if you ever need that, if you ever need someone to do this, just let me know. And we don't take them up on it, because it's like, oh no, I could, it's fine but say yes to help. Think about for example, if you got a cleaner to do the stuff around the house, is your time better spent on your business? If you pay the cleaner £15 an hour, and if you were to do a call, you could earn £100 an hour. Well, that's money well spent. But in your business as well, I know it's really hard to make that leap and start paying people to help you. But I think what we need to do as solopreneurs is be very aware of what our strengths and our weaknesses are, and you get support around your weaknesses. And there are also things that we're absolutely capable of doing, but whether we should be doing it, whether we should be spending the time doing it, like faffing around on Canva and getting, like completely stuck on what photo to use, when actually if you pay a VA, 25, 30 pounds an hour, and they can just bash off 10 graphics for you, then that's a better use of your money.
Yeah, no, completely. This brings us on to the last one, number 7, which is kind of build on smart work and be super time savvy.
Yes.
Focusing on the right things at the right time. So what are the tips here, do you think, for most people?
So I think one danger of being a solopreneur and running the business and being the business, whether it's a product or a service that you're actually delivering, is the fact that we spend so much time working in the business that we don't ever step back and look at the overview. And so that means that we're trying to keep the wheels turning, but we're not necessarily making sure that things fit together. We're not having our processes and systems in place that are going to help save time. And so for me, I like to talk about implementing CEO time. And sometimes people are like, well, CEO, like I'm not a CEO. But if you are the chief decision maker in your business, if you are the only decision maker, you are also the CEO. And what I love about this term is that it does make you step up and go, actually, I am the owner of the business. And we need to, and that's really hard it takes time to own that. But that is what you are. And so you need to create time. And every Monday morning, I have a block in my diary called CEO time. And that is when I'm looking at the bigger picture of, okay, what do I want to sell this month? What do I need to do marketing wise then to be able to do that? So, what kind of copy do I want to create? What can I ask my online business manager to do to help me with this? Which clients are finishing at what point? What do I need? That's time, is overview time. And it's only if you have that overview that you can look at how much time things are taking you and then get systems and processes in place to speed things up. Because, we can just get lost in endless social media posting and things like that. But actually, if you're more organized about it and more strategic, it doesn't have to be something that's in your head all the time.
Yeah. So that CEO time, if I understand it correctly, that's almost thinking about your overall strategy.
Yes. Yeah. And then the micro actions that need to happen.
Yeah.
So, it's a great thing to do on a Monday morning, especially when you're transitioning from being mum at the weekend. Yeah. And then it's like, because we expect ourselves to hit the ground running, drop the kids off at the school run, and then suddenly I'm business owner and this is what I'm going to do. And, for me, making that decision to have Monday mornings, I'm not ready to jump straight into mentoring someone at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. And I'm going to accept that. And actually, I'm going to be a much better mentor to them if I've had this time, taking my time, having a nice coffee, thinking about what's going on in my business that week.
Yeah. And let's talk about mentoring and coaching then, because you've talked about having a mentor yourself. And again, it's one of those things. I always find it's a strange bit of kind of human psychology, isn't it? But we always are reluctant to spend money on our own personal development or our own health, whereas we're happy spending money on holidays or buying clothes or whatever it might be. I read in your book, you talk about, it's sometimes the best money you can spend. And from your own personal experience, the earlier you get that advice, almost the sooner you start benefiting from it. So for people who are considering, maybe thinking about getting a coach, what would you say from your personal experiences are the real benefits? I
think, I invest in lots of different types of things, like online courses and going to conferences and things like that. And, they offer they offer so many great things, and you can really learn new skills and stuff like that. But the difference with having a mentor that you're working one-to-one with is that you've got that relationship where they get to really know the day-to-day of what's going on in your business and in your life. And you're able to have someone to hold the mirror up to you. And because we all have stories that we tell ourselves about why things aren't working, or why I haven't got to this point yet. And when you have that kind of like deeper relationship with one person, you can have those conversations that are really going to shift that mindset, and kind of help you overcome the blocks. But so it's such a grey area now between what a coach is and what a mentor is. But I really like I think it was the Coaching Academy, their definition was that a consultant is 100% them giving you advice. A coach is 100% them asking you the right questions so that you find your own answers. And a mentor is 50% asking you the right questions for you to find your own answers, and 50% sharing their own knowledge and expertise. So I really like that definition. It's very grey because now you get coaches who are basically consultants. But that's where I feel like I sit, because I want to be able to share the experiences that I've had and the things that I've learned over the years, but also I want to help people find their own answers. So it's a really nice kind of combination of that. But I think the way I see my role is that these women that I'm working with, they are out there busy supporting everyone else through their business, in their life, and I get to support them and I get to be their cheerleader. And it's the best feeling ever to have that relationship with someone where I really get to know what's going on for them and what their challenges are, and have that kind of one-to-one conversation.
I mean, that really is amazingly rewarding work, isn't it? Particularly for someone like yourself who's lived and breathed it and is able now to share those experiences, so that other people maybe don't have to make some of those mistakes or learn it the hard way, which I guess brings us back to the book, Mumpreneur Evolution, which is an interview with over 20 of those female entrepreneurs that you've worked with. And I guess just for people that haven't had the opportunity to read the book yet, what do you think are the key lessons or themes that you see coming out all of the time?
I think there's a real theme of the fact that, we were talking about taking action even though you don't think you know everything yet. Most people in that book were talking about situations where they were having imposter syndrome or having self-doubt, and they just had to move past it in order to move forward. Talking about the honest challenge of juggling and maybe slower growth in their business because they're trying to juggle being a parent as well, but also the kind of the benefits of having a supportive community and surrounding yourself with women who we're all trying to do the same thing. We might have very different businesses and different industries, but actually a lot of the challenges are the same, and we're all striving to create this life for ourselves and this business that has a positive impact on other people, but also that gives us the flexibility that we want, and I think it's all about enjoying what you do. And that's one thing that I talk about that on my membership sales page as well. I want to help you enjoy running a business, because there is a lot that can feel very, very hard. Sometimes I was thinking maybe my tagline should just be, I want to help you make you feel better, but that's not very marketing savvy. But that's genuinely I know how challenging it can feel, and I know how disheartening it can feel when things go wrong and when things don't grow at the pace that you think they should, because everyone's telling you that you should be earning 6 figures in 2 weeks. I want to be there to say, that's okay. You're okay. You're doing the right things.
Yeah, no, it's so valuable. And you touched on community. We said we were going to talk a little bit more about that, because it is so important, whatever you're doing, to have the right people around you. You offer, we've talked a bit about your online community, but you also do in-person events down here in Bournemouth. And how have you found doing those?
I love it. I mean, I'm a real advocate for online community. I think it's absolutely possible to build incredible connection and friendships online. And a testament to that was when I did my first Momentum Day, which is my annual event for women in business. And the very first one was in Bournemouth, like it must be 7 years ago, I think. And, all these women were meeting in this room and they're all hugging each other and they're laughing, and they've never met in real life before, but they connected through my membership, the Cocoon. I love online, and online means that you can connect with people that are not in the local area, but in person is just so special. And when I first left London, so when I launched the Momentum Day, I was doing one in Bournemouth a year and one in London a year, and I did that for a couple of years. And then I realized that the people in London were like, I want to come to the Bournemouth one because I want to come and stay by the seaside. So then I thought, do you know what? It's a real hassle organising an event in a city that I don't live in. I'm just going to do it in Bournemouth. So now it's once a year in Bournemouth, and I have people coming from all over the country and staying in the hotel or staying in a hotel nearby, and enjoying the beautiful beach and, that lovely vibe that we have here.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's really easy to feel like, you need to go out and service people all over the place. And, of course, it depends what kind of business that you're doing. But for me, it's actually worked really well to have the Bournemouth beach life kind of vibe and drawing people here instead of me having to go out everywhere else.
It is a true story of success on the South Coast.
Yeah. And they love it. And now I run 1 day CEO days, I call them. And it's like a maximum of 12 of us in a room working on our businesses, brainstorming, masterminding. And once again, that is in a hotel overlooking the sea, and it's just, I think, people are really drawn to that idea of investing in themselves to come along for that day and just feel like they're hiding away in a little seaside retreat. And it's just wonderful.
Sounds amazing. It does really sound good. And I did want to ask you a little bit about who are the different type of women that you work with. It sounds like you work through the whole spectrum, from people maybe first taking tentative steps all the way through to people perhaps who have been running something successfully, but like you say, might just need a coach or a mentor, however you define it.
Yeah, so I work with people right through. I've got people in my membership who've been running for 15 years in their business. I think the thing about the membership as well is it is that acknowledgement that as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we need to be continually learning. And, the Cocoon is all about embracing that and just being open to new stuff and being inspired by other people. I always find it hard when people say to me, oh, what kind of businesses do people have? I mean, and I'll list some of them because it is so diverse. Obviously we've got social media consultants, we've got doulas, photographers, graphic designers, will writers, TikTok experts, wellbeing coaches, therapists, holistic healers. I mean, it is so eclectic, and that's what makes it so rich as well, because when we have our networking calls, you've got women coming from all these different areas, and they're all so willing to share their wisdom with each other and support each other. So I talk about sisterhood. I mean, you can't beat that. And it's the same on the networking calls online as it is at the Momentum Day in person. The sisterhood in the room was just on fire, and just that amazing feeling of just, we all want each other to succeed. It's not about clambering over each other to get to the top. It's about rising up together.
It's an amazing picture, and it's brilliant to hear you talk so passionately about it. It does sound like an amazing day. I guess it's probably a good moment to talk about, because obviously you talked about that kind of joy and that sisterhood. As you know, another one of the themes of this podcast is happiness, and what that is. It's a word, happy, that's small in a way. It's one of the first words we learn, but so complex in the modern world, a lot like the challenges a lot of your female entrepreneurs are facing. So for you, what do you see as the true meaning of happiness?
I think happiness is about having a sense of purpose. And having a meaning to your life. And that can be different for everyone. And I mean, that could be having a dog, you know, that keeps you busy each day and that you get love from and you give love to. It could be having kids. It could be your career. It could be volunteering. But I think that, you know, it's when you don't have a sense of purpose on a daily basis and have some meaning to your life, that's when it's really easy to get depressed and just think, well, why am I even here? You know, for me, knowing that I'm having a positive impact on the women that I work with is just absolutely fills my cup. But at the same time, it's just as important to me, if not more important, that I am raising my boys into amazing human beings. You know, I take that very seriously. That's a responsibility. But I think we need a sense of purpose, and I think that happiness can be found in very simple things. And I think if you like coffee, you'll get this, but you know, I am so happy that I can go out to a coffee shop and buy myself a vanilla latte and sit in a coffee shop and drink it in my own headspace, maybe with my laptop. That makes me so happy. And it's like the smallest thing. And so we all need to work out what that is for us, because I think relying on other people to make us happy is very dangerous. And that's something that, you know, I've really worked on over the years, like getting that internal validation and learning to enjoy my own company, because I used to hate being on my own. I absolutely hated being on my own. And I used to drive my mum mad because I always wanted friends around. I didn't want to be on my own. And now I love my own company, and that's so liberating. And I know that, you know, I can make myself happy, and that's just so empowering.
Yeah, I really think it is important to be able to find happiness in the small things. It's funny you should mention coffee, because I did read a quote I can't remember who it was now, but it was effectively saying, if you can't be happy with a good coffee, you're unlikely to be happy with the big things. But I think it talks to that idea, whatever that coffee is for you. Mine's probably coffee and a cake.
Oh yeah, that's a good day.
But it is really important to discover those and to have those little moments of happiness, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So coming back to where we started then, success, that theme. We heard about what it was at the start of your career, and I think a lot of people resonate with that. You know, when you're starting, it's all about promotion, and you know, the nature of it is we all want to earn more, and you feel like you're on that kind of ladder. You've gone through a whole transition into a completely different chapter of your life, as you talked about, almost like a first part and a second part. So following that whole journey, how do you look at success now?
For me, success is having the freedom to focus on the things that I love and that bring me joy. And, you know, I've been able to create this business around the things that I love doing, and I work with the people that I love. I don't work with horrible people. I don't have to deal with any of that. You know, all the politics that I used to deal with in TV, I don't have to deal with that now. Like, I have carved this business very intentionally around the things that I love. And I also have the flexibility to work around my own energy levels. So, you know, I tried the whole, like, on a Monday, I will do my finances and that's what I will do. No, I don't want to do that. Actually, I want to go and walk through the park and think about content ideas, and I can do it. So I've created this business that allows me to work around my energy levels. Also, that gives me the freedom to be there for the kids when, you know, picking them up from school, or now they're both, I don't need to pick them up anymore. And that was one thing. And I did have a real moment that kind of brought a tear to my eye when I realized that, you know, one of my whole goals for starting my business was to be able to do the school run. And I've done it. 11 years, 2 kids, and I've done it, and I've achieved it, and I'm so proud. And, you know, yes, I might not have been earning as much money as I could have been if I'd been working longer in the day. I don't care. I did that. I achieved that. That's what I set out to do when I was thinking about starting my own business. So And as well, I get to enjoy the holidays with them. I get, the last 2 years we went to Canada for 34 days and I left my business at home. Last year we went to Scotland for like 3.5 weeks. This year actually we stayed at home and I was very grateful for that. But it's having that flexibility and freedom. So I feel like I've nailed it.
I was going to say, I must admit, sat here listening, I was like, wow, this is incredible, like those achievements, and you definitely have nailed it. That's why you're here, and that's why you've got so much great advice and wisdom for other people, I think. And
I appreciate that. My level, my version of success might not be yours, and that's, everyone has got and this is why I want to help people to create their own version and to help them, whatever that looks like, help them take the next steps.
No, definitely. And that leads me on to another question related to this idea of success, because I'm always interested, like, what do you think are the key skills that you've learned and developed that enable you to have successfully achieved what you have?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, you've got your technical skills, like, I'm completely self-taught with all the digital stuff. I build my own website. I use Kajabi, which I love. I
saw there was a podcast episode on how it was transformational.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it enables, like I say, it enables me as one person to create this business. With online courses, podcasts, like all this stuff myself. So you've got the practical skills there, but in terms of really, I would say so much comes down to personal development work. And I used to be terrified of public speaking. I would always go bright red. When I was working in TV and I had to speak in front of people, I'd go bright red. My hands would be shaking. I always felt like I was tripping up over my own words and saying stupid things, and that everyone was judging me and thinking she's like a child. All that would go through my head. Even when I was a production manager, I really struggled with that. And then when I was running Ealing Mums in Business with my business partner, Shelley, she was great at speaking. She was so confident, and she would just like respond to people's questions and just, she knew what to say. Even if she didn't know the answer, she took it with grace. And so I would just hide behind her. And it was when I'd started this business on my own. We came back from Abu Dhabi and I thought, gosh, if I don't speak up, like what is this business if I'm not actually going to step forward? At that point, I was hiding behind the logo and doing all those things that I tell people not to. I actually invested in help, and I had a healing session first of all, and she like unlocked some stuff in me, and it really did make a difference. And I went to Tony Robbins. I don't know whether you know Tony Robbins. I went to his Unleash the Power Within 4-day immersive coaching event, and I walked on hot coals. And, that was one of the best things I've ever done. And at the time, I remember the investment for that was just like, oh my God, it was so much money to invest in, and but I thought I really want to do it, and I did it. And now I look back and I think I would pay 10 times that for the experience that I had then. And what that event helped me do was build my resilience. And it was my resilience and my learning that it's lovely to have validation from other people. And of course we all want that and we love that, but really it's about validation from within. And that's what has given me the strength, I think, to put myself out there more. And I know that, when you're getting visible, that's something I like helping people with as well. When you're putting yourself out there, it can feel really vulnerable, and not everyone's going to connect with you. But the point is that the people that do connect will come forward. So, we have to get out of our own heads with that. Yeah. So lots of personal development stuff. Yeah, no, definitely. There's a really good lesson in that, though, isn't there? Just to keep trying to improve every day and just to keep trying to learn, I think. That's one of the key things, actually. Be the best version of you. Don't try and be the better version than someone else, and like competing with competitors or other, like Mr. Blogs down the road. Like, who do you want to be and how do you want your business to be the best version? And that's what I do. I really try and just focus on being the best version that I can be of myself. And, you know, how can I help my clients? How can I improve the experience that they have with me? That's all we can do. Just focus on that.
Well, you said it a lot better than I did. But I want to finish with a regular feature of the podcast called Life by Misadventure. And when I hear of all your adventures, all your travels, and you're talking about walking on hot coals, I'm sure this will resonate with you, because I think we do learn all kinds of lessons outside of our normal kind of day-to-day working life for doing those type of things, whether it's travel or activities we're involved in. I'd never thought about walking on hot coals. That's a new one. But what do you think is a lesson you've learnt from an unexpected source?
I think a good example for me is when we went to live in Abu Dhabi. And when you think of what happiness should look like and what success should look like, it's living an expat lifestyle. It's supposedly having lots of money because you're living, you know, you've got this expat job. It's living somewhere with palm trees where it's always sunny and it never rains. And the reality for me is that I felt empty inside. And, you know, I really struggled with my mental health while we were there. And I would be reaching out to my friends and saying, I'm really struggling. And they would be replying with, oh, but your photos look amazing. Wow. Like, it looks so cool there. And literally, they could not comprehend the fact that I was posting pictures of palm trees and beaches and I was saying that I was really depressed. Like, they couldn't marry those two together. And I just think it is such a good lesson that, you know, what we think other people are experiencing, we really have no idea. And, you know, that idea of what I thought would make me happy and what I thought would make me feel successful, actually it did the opposite. And what I appreciate so much more now is a normal life in a normal place, in a beautiful place like Bournemouth. But I love the NHS because, you know, you cannot take the NHS for granted. We heard some real horror stories when we were over in Abu Dhabi. I love the seasons, you know, all these kind of things that, you know, we've got to be careful about whose idea of success we are following. And I think that was a really big lesson for me, that, you know, it's all about working out what's right for you. And sometimes you need to try it to realize that it's not for you.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. That's a brilliant way to end a great lesson, and also I think for everybody a reminder that just because someone's Instagram pictures look like they're having a great time, it may not necessarily be what's going on inside. But sadly, that brings us to the end. So many things that we could have talked about. Maybe we can do this again sometime. I've really enjoyed this whole conversation. Like I said, it was really educational for me. So what people listening, what are the best links for an audience if they want to get in touch with you to discuss some of the ideas we've talked about today? I'd
love them to do that. My podcast, the Life Friendly Business Podcast, if they want to hear more of this kind of discussion. But my website is lifefriendlybusiness.com, and on Instagram I'm at lifefriendlybiz, same on Facebook or LinkedIn, Erin Thomas Wong. But yeah, I would love to chat to people more about these things if they've resonated.
Excellent. Well, I'll definitely recommend the podcast to people. It's brilliant. I love the fact it's in little bite-sized chunks. So in people's busy time, you can always make 15 minutes to listen to something like that. I say it every week, but meeting the people we have around this area has just been so inspiring to me. And so, particularly for someone like yourself, who I see is really walking the walk and sharing the benefit of all the experiences that you've lived yourself. Built multiple businesses whilst bringing up 2 kids. And everything you do, from your podcast, your website, the book, for me has just such a clear, positive message. So I just want to say thank you so much for being such a brilliant guest today. And and for providing such an amazing service to local entrepreneurs and everyone beyond. We're really lucky to have you in the area.
Thank you so much. That's so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.